So once again, The Rock has taken a sequel I was not interested in at all and made a thoroughly entertaining film out of it. So let's talk about it. So in Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, 4 teenagers who aren't really friends with each other find themselves in detention at the same time. In detention, they discover a video game system, plug it in, each of them select a character, and then they're sucked into the video game world where each of them becomes the character that they selected. They must survive the world of Jumanji and beat the game in order to return to the real world. And the catch in all of this is that each of the teenagers selected someone totally different from themselves. So The Rock is actually a wimpy, scared, nerdy teenage boy. Kevin Hart is actually a very athletic, tall, muscular guy. And Jack Black is an Instagram-obsessed teenage girl that's incredibly vain and boy-obsessed. And this just makes for a very fun environment where they're all playing against type. Now, the film is technically a sequel or reboot to the original Jumanji, but you don't really need to have seen the previous one. This is a standalone film that works in and of itself and a very enjoyable film. Actually, the guy I went to go see it with said that this movie is so much more entertaining than a Jumanji sequel deserves to be, and I would totally agree with that. Before I give my full thoughts, tell me what you thought down below in the comment section. Tell me what you liked, what you hated, and give me some context. Were you looking forward to it? Did it look dreadful? And what did you think about the original one? All that kind of stuff to give me some context for where you're coming from. With that said, let's dive into it. Let's start off with the worst parts of this movie. Easily the weakest thing about this film is that it's a pretty predictable Hollywood blockbuster. From the very beginning, within the first 15 minutes, you will know exactly everyone's character arc, where they're going to end up at the end. As the movie progresses and you meet some characters, if you suspect something about someone, it's probably going to be true. It all plays out essentially exactly how you think it would. Now, granted, it's thoroughly enjoyable as it does all this, but it is exactly the movie that you expect it to be. From there, let's move on to the mixed part of this movie, because there actually wasn't all that much I actually fully disliked about it. And with this movie, there's a few parts that are a little bit mixed in. So for example, the villain in it, he's not very good. He's a pretty weak villain that he's just kind of creepy and there's bugs all around him and he's tracking them down and chasing them the whole movie. But he's not really a character. He's just a video game villain as their characters in a video game in the movie. And so in that, he's not particularly engaging, but at the same time, it doesn't really hold the movie back. That his function in the movie is all it really needs to be to kind of drive things forward, give some tension, because the movie is thoroughly enjoyable and them just trying to get to the end of the game and through all these adventures they're on works. And so it's not so much that it's fully bad that I felt the movie was lacking something because the villain was weak. It's just true that the villain was weak. So it's more of a mixed bag thing than to me than something that was fully bad. Also in the movie, the action felt also a bit mixed to me. In the one sense, it's very vibrant and exciting. There's a few really cool, iconic shots in it, but other times it felt like they could have done more with it. And so like The Rock has some scenes, since he's the tough guy action guy, that he can just beat people up. And they do just kind of little teases of the fact of his fighting skills, and he does like one wrestling move, and you think, if you've got The Rock, why don't you do more wrestling moves? Because it would fit perfectly into the story you're telling, the world that you've created, the setup and all of this for The Rock to actually get to be The Rock in this movie in a couple of these scenes that play out. And it's also kind of choppy at different times, which is frustrating because it'll do one shot and it'll be this cool wide take as you do something cool moves that they put in the trailer, and then other ones just kind of feel close quarters, choppy. You can't really see what's going on. And also the way the characterizations work out, specifically with Kevin Hart's character, it feels like two different people. So we'll get into the positives of the other actors in just a second. But with, for example, Kevin Hart, when he's Kevin Hart, he's just Kevin Hart. He doesn't at all feel like the teenager that we see in the real world at the beginning or the end. They don't match personalities at all. It's just, he's just this alpha male football player guy in the real world. And then we go into video game world and he's just Kevin Hart doing his Kevin Hart shtick, which is funny and it's enjoyable and it's fun because he's short, and so it works well for the entertainment and all that fun stuff. However, at the same time, his personality doesn't jive with what kind of happened before, and it doesn't sync quite right. So those were kind of the mixed things in the movie kind of held back. With that said, Let's start talking about the best things about this movie, because I really liked it. And the best thing about this movie is that the cast just has such great chemistry. They each are charismatic and fun and entertaining in and of themselves, but they just work together so well when you just put kind of The Rock in there with Kevin Hart. We've seen them before do this shtick, and it works, and here it works better than it's ever worked before, as they just have this back and forth in this video game world that sets them up for so much chemistry. And then you throw Jack Black in there, who's just too good at playing this vain high school girl. And then Karen Gillan just plays off them so well. And you would think she'd be the odd one out because you got all these charismatic leading funny men. And then, she's been in some stuff, but she hasn't been kind of the sort of roles that they've had. No, she fits perfectly in, plays off them well. And for the first half of the movie, I was thinking they were kind of the lead comedic roles and she was kind of the straight man in the mix. And then they give her a section where she has to be a girly girl in the middle of the movie, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about as the movie plays out, and it's so funny. And every single one of these people, leads, gets a standout great moment. It's just so funny, and it works so well together. In general, just the setup for the movie works, as they're in a video game, and it's a movie that understands how video games work, and you have so many lives, and different characters have different skill sets, and there's a certain lack of logic in video games because characters are only programmed with so much information, so only one person can read a map. The characters in the game that aren't players only know so much information, so they repeat themselves. There's all these little quirks of video games that are just intertwined into it that just play out so well, are really funny, and just great for this kind of fun actual video game like situation. And even the action sequences feel like they're out of a video game, and you can think, this is as something's unfolding in it, you can see kind of the plot devices that happen in video games happen that lead to this sets up the next action sequence in it, and that's the way the story unfolds. And even the way it kind of gives exposition in it, it's video game-like, so just a lot of fun stuff like that works. In general, I already talked about the humor with the actors and stuff, but they find a lot of opportunities to play off the scenarios that they've created with the characters. And so there's some stuff with Jack Black being a teenage girl that's now a man. And so there's, it's in general a pretty family-friendly movie, but there's 2 scenes, I believe, of dick jokes that are actually really funny, that fit perfectly in the movie. It's just really well crafted because Jack Black plays them so well, and they make so much sense in light of the movie that's going on that you can pull them off. And normally I can be like, these are cheap jokes, but in this context you go, no, these are really funny jokes that make sense. But at the same, like I said, if you're kind of looking for the family friendly, what's the age group on it? There's a couple scenes that kind of get a little bit racy in that regard, and even though they make sense in the movie. Really funny, though. Also, Nick Jonas shows up in it and does a pretty good job in it. I didn't know the guy could act. There's also a ton of character actors. Those people you're like, it's that guy. You can't remember their name, but you love it when they show up and stuff. They kind of populate this whole movie and just kind of bring their little charms to each of these little roles in it. And there's some cameos, especially one at the end of it, that are just fun to see these faces show up. Overall, this movie is one of the biggest surprises of the year. A very pleasant surprise that, I thought they were nuts that they were making this movie. I couldn't believe that they're making a Jumanji 2 with video game stuff, and I was like, oh man, what's The Rock doing? I was so wrong. This movie is so entertaining. It plays by the rules. It's very predictable. You know where it's going, but in the best way possible. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. If I'm being honest, I think you're going to really like this movie. If you see the trailer and you're even kind of like, that looks kind of amusing, you'll probably really like this movie. It's got the action, the comedy, and just charismatic, charming people driving you throughout the entire thing that have great chemistry with each other, and all of them bringing unique types of humor and different things that are just enjoyable to watch throughout the entire movie. How about you, though? What did you think about it? Tell me down below in the comment section what you loved, what you hated, and your expectations going into it. And if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, but the key thing is I don't want to just talk about movies. I want to talk about movies with you. So join me in the comment section. Tell me what you thought about the movie. Let's have a nice, lively discussion. And as always, thank you so much for watching.